Hello everybody, welcome to the Redmen TV and your latest Liverpool news update. My name is Dan Clubb. I'm joined by Mr. J Blade, as he's known on Twitter, John Reid to you and I. How you doing, mate? You good?
Yeah, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm sound. Enjoying your summer so far. Missing the footy yet? I mean, the domestic football, Liverpool, the Reds, not necessarily football per se.
Yeah, it's been a weird one, hasn't it? Like, I think the emotion, at the end of last season, it's also took over the end of the season, didn't it? So it's been nice having a break, I think, as in just to calm down and then it sort of makes sense of everything. But I'm after a few weeks off, I'm sort of itching to get back in now, I think.
Yeah, and I think the Arne Slot interview dropping, as the kids say yesterday, has sort of heightened the enthusiasm and the optimism and the thoughts around Liverpool being a thing once again. Obviously, he was talking about transfers, and actually, interestingly enough, I'll just pop into the comments before we crack on what we're here to talk about. Darwin, afternoon, mate, hope you are well. And James Sotherington. So it doesn't mean to be the bearer of doom and gloom, but genuinely can't imagine Arnie has even looked at any transfers till he's assessed our current squad. Just selling papers, you never walk alone. Now, whilst I agree with you in a lot of what you've said there, he quite often yesterday, John, referenced the fact that he had been speaking to Richard Hughes a hell of a lot and talking about the recruitment side of things. And obviously we're going to speak in a little bit more detail about some rumours and obviously one appointment as well, which had been confirmed, which was very much in tandem with Richard Hughes. But do you make that comment right, or do you think, as much as I agree that Arne Slot will definitely want to look at the squad, he'll want some pre-season time, he'll want to get lads back from the international tournaments, all that sort of stuff. Absolutely. However, I think it'd be foolish, or we'd be foolish rather, not to be thinking, how can I improve? Because he's already said he's watched loads of Liverpool games, he said he's watched loads of Liverpool training sessions. He will have in his mind's eye, he will have already ideas of where we can recruit this summer to improve, I would have thought. Yeah,
I mean, I think the whole interview yesterday, if you like, beyond sort of, I guess, like just introducing you to the man, because none of us have seen a lot of him, it gave me a lot of confidence in sort of like the approach that he's going to take. A lot of what he sort of referenced and spoke about was very holistic. It was very like, I spoke to the manager before he left, we had a long chat and, he's given me a lot of tips. I've been around, I've seen the squad from afar, as the Feyenoord manager. I know a lot about what they've been doing. I wanted to accept a project of this size because it was a step up kind of thing. And then he spoke a lot about, watching training videos, which I thought was the most interesting thing. Yeah. Not just like watching the games, but watching what we've done in training sessions and stuff, and referencing Pep Linders. Yeah. So I think he's probably got a good sense of it. And I think, it's a bit like when you start a new job or whatever. Like, all the appointments the club have made behind the scenes in terms of bringing Edwards back and stuff have all been in place now for 6, 7, 8 months. They're not all going to have been sat there doing nothing. Do you know what I mean? Like they'll have been looking at the squad throughout last season, as the manager was going, thinking like, well, what can we do to change this? Who do we need to be looking at moving on, or where are we not getting maybe the best output kind of thing? And they'll have all that data already. And he was very clear, I think, sort of yesterday. I know he referenced himself as the manager at one point, but I think he was very clear in sort of being like, it's not just me. There's continuity. The backroom staff that's been here for however many years, a lot of it's still here, and that's the concept, and the aim is to continue that.
No, absolutely. I think for what it's worth, and I won't unpick the full interview right now because I know Chloe and Steve did a brilliant job of doing that yesterday on YouTube, but I thought he spoke really well. I thought he sort of exuded a confidence, the type of confidence you'd want to see without sort of crossing into arrogance. But I think as well, it was key that he's himself because he's his own man. Trying to follow or trying to emulate Jurgen Klopp feels nigh on impossible. So just be who you are and just all airs and graces. And I felt like he did really well. And I think as well, we were so desperate for sort of that throwaway line or that line we can cling to like doubters to believers, but it never arrived. And I'm quite glad it never arrived in a way because it puts just another level of pressure on it. But yeah, anyway, we'll dive into some things. Florian, before we do so, you're absolutely spot on in your assessment, by the way. I think Richard Hughes in tandem with Michael Edwards, Julian Ward will absolutely be well across the recruitment. But anyone who watched my chat with James Pearce last week will know that Arne Slot will also be getting involved in that side of things. And I'm well, thanks, Nathan. Hope you're good as well, mate. Likewise, Adam, we're all sound. And we'll pop into the comments as and when necessary as we go along. Sound. Nathan Vice thought Slot came across well as well, which is good. Cool. News then. England play tonight in the Euros, for those who aren't aware. And according to report, I think it's been widely publicly known now that Trent Alexander-Arnold will be continuing in midfield. This report here says he's going to stand by Liverpool star Trent Alexander-Arnold. Goes on to mention Phil Foden as well. Jay, I don't know how much you've seen of the Euros generally, to be honest, but certainly the England first game and Trent in midfield. What did you make of it? For me, I was really fascinated to watch it because there's been so much conversation in the round, and not just in recent times, but in over the past 18 months, really, from a Liverpool perspective. We've seen him wander into there in that hybrid right-back 6 type role that we've seen him do. I think he does that excellently. And I've had my concerns for a while about how press-resistant he is and whether he can do it when he's getting swarmed a little bit. And I think there was a little issue in that Serbia game personally. And also, I think when he sees the whole game ahead of him and he can arrive into midfield, he feels that's a lot better suited. Whether he's perfectly suited to starting in there, I've always had my reservations. What did you make of it? And I guess, what do you think of it moving forwards? Because it looks like he's going to carry on.
I thought it worked for sort of 40 minutes. I think he needs someone with him still. I think, you can't ignore the criticism, I think, around his defensive work and stuff, and all the sort of things that get said. I think I think a lot of it's unfair, if you like, and a lot of it's just people beating people with sticks and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think having Rice with him, I think, can help him out a bit with some of the stuff. Definitely helps. I think he obviously had the error that they nearly scored from, but also, there was a couple of moments where, I think that there was one I'm thinking of in particular where, I think he played up to Trippier on the left wing, and that was the only out we had, and it was the only way we sort of got forward in the second half. It's I'm sort of happy for him to continue, to be honest. I think the talent that he's got, particularly for international football, should speak for itself, I think, rather than necessarily tactics. I'm not trying to knock international football, but we all know, I think, probably tactically it's a step back from club football. Yeah. And I think it's the best place for him to learn, really. And it was the first game. There was always going to be a bit of rust, and I think if he, thinking of it from the other perspective, if you like, if he had that game that he had, which was 6, 7 out of 10 or whatever, and the manager suddenly bombed them out, what does that do for the rest of his tournament? What does that do for the idea that he's going to play for England, if you like, maybe in midfield going forward? You're just giving the press and, sort of people like that, sort of sticks to beat him with that, so you've got to persist with them, I think.
No, absolutely spot on, yeah. And I have no issue whatsoever with, mainly because I'm not massively invested in the results of England national side, it's probably fair to say, but I have no issue with him continuing that role. I'd like to see him do it throughout the whole tournament, if only to get more of a look at it and see if it does work for Liverpool moving forwards, because I've been the first to sort of praise Conor Bradley and how brilliant he's been. So I don't hate the idea of a world whereby Conor Bradley becomes a more prominent right back for us and Trent does play in a double pivot in midfield alongside McAllister or whoever. No issue whatsoever. My main concern's always been, are we getting the most and the best out of Trent in that role? And I've never seen it, so I don't know. And my first real glimpse of it, certainly from the start of the game, was that England game last week. And everything I felt like I might have an issue with, just in moments, came out. You mentioned the moment he got caught a little bit, his touch wasn't quite right. And his touch, 99 times out of 100, is absolutely immaculate. And I just wonder whether it wasn't because he had his back to goal, he was facing his own goal, he could probably feel the presence of 2 Serbians coming up against him, and he probably thought, for that split second, I'm under pressure here, and his touch was wrong. And those are the sort of things in midfield you just can't allow to happen, basically. So we'll see. And like I say, something Nathan Vikes makes a point, he could well score a worldie later on against Denmark, and this entire conversation will be put to rest, and all the pundits who have been critical in and around it will suddenly come out the woodwork and say, what a masterstroke, how boss is Trent, generational talent, all the things we know to be true. And I hope he does, because it's Trent and Liverpool, and that I think he's a wonderful, wonderful footballer. I'm just not quite sure, but we'll wait and see. We will wait and see. Moving on then. Transfer stuff, as ever, dominates this show. Obviously, all very much in the rumour stage of things right now, but according to a report from Football Transfers, Liverpool have entered the conversation for Michael Olise in a bid to beat Chelsea and Manchester United to his signature. The Reds are in the market for a right winger, with a Crystal Palace attacker as well as Johan Bakayoko of PSV Eindhoven, both on their shortlist. Now, Michael Olise, we had a quick look at his stats before we went live, Jay. 19 Premier League appearances last season, 10 goals, 6 assists. Obviously, you can see on that graphic there, predominantly, so I'll scroll down and touch so you can actually see it, not my head, predominantly coming from the right wing, and a little bit, and I mean a little bit, more central. Now, wonderful player, injury problems, as again you can see by that there, missed pretty much the entirety to start the campaign with a hamstring problem. They've plagued him a little bit. However, one thing you would say, given the amount of football he did miss, those numbers are exceptional, and he is an exceptional talent as well. Yeah, I mean, I think he's of the players in the league, if you like, who we sort of see regularly that we've been linked with, I think he's the one everyone's sort of, we're all looking at and thinking we'd like him, like hot property, like, yeah, I agree, yeah. And also, like sort of around football as well, like within the league, like you say, you mentioned United and Chelsea there. I wouldn't be surprised if Arsenal and a few other clubs were looking at him as well.
not least because there's a dearth of right wingers in terms of football at the minute. But no, he's a fantastic talent, and I think I agree with you sort of on the numbers and stuff. I think you can look at it from the perspective of the injuries, which I think is, given his age, is something you can probably figure out. You know, he's not quite like completely mature yet. You know, he probably still have a few growing pains still. But also, I think it's probably the job you're asking of him as well. You know, that Palace team's evolved, and it's still quite a young team at its core, and he's been given a lot of responsibility in terms of being like the guy, being the goal scorer. Obviously, him and Mateta and Eze. But I think it's something you could definitely work out with him, I think. And I think when you watch him as a footballer, he's got all the sort of tools. You can see like the class, you know, you get I think looking at numbers and stuff is one thing, but also like the eye test. And whenever I've seen him play, I think like you can see he's a quality player, and he's a big fish in a small pond at Palace, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, the eye test point is a brilliant one, by the way. I think he absolutely ticks that box. He's a sensational player, he really is. And I think Chelsea were pursuing him hotly last summer. Obviously ended up signing the new deal. There had been reports of a new contract for Michael Olise at Palace, and they have been sort of pushed back against as well, I've seen today. So one to keep an eye on, I imagine. This is the sort of race Liverpool I think we should be involved in, to be honest with you, because at 22, you know, on the fringes of what is an incredible French national team. So yeah, absolutely. And I guess just to finish on Michael Olise, again, in terms of player profile, in terms of what Liverpool will be after, he's in around that sweet spot in terms of the age, the amount of football he's played. Obviously the numbers are just about to explode, it feels like. But I guess in terms of position, is right wing, is a potential backup, potential long-term replacement for Salah somewhere you think we should definitely be looking this summer?
I think so. I think just for numbers as well. I think I've heard a few different sort of opinions on Salah in terms of like, you know, do you look to maybe move him inside more, given his age, and put him at number 9, or just sort of generally speaking, where's he at with his game? I worry in the sense that I think behind Salah we haven't really got anything. I know we've played Elliott on the right a lot, and it's whether the new manager sticks with 4-3-3, but certainly if we go to like a 4-2-3-1, maybe we've got a bit more cover. Yeah. But in terms of out wingers, no. So I think it's an area we need to look at in the squad, and I think it gives you, whatever happens with Salah, it also gives you the surety. So even if we end up keeping him and we put him up front, we've still got someone who can play right wing as well. Yeah,
100%. Yeah, I just want to revisit a couple of comments from the Trent stuff a moment ago. The Artful Dodger asked, a lot of this does depend probably on where Trent wants to play, I would say. I think there's obviously a conversation to be had between Arne Slot and quite a few with Liverpool squad, I would say. But I think Trent is the most fascinating one. And do you think there is a world where Arne Slot walks up to Trent on his first day, hopefully with Trent having signed a new contract, I would like to say as well, but and says, listen mate, ultimately I see you as X, but you might want to be Y. Do you think that could well play into what happens in the future? Or will it be a case of Arne Slot going, this is what's going to happen, mate. You're going to play here for me. I see you as this. This is your role. Do you think it kind of works both ways?
I think it's probably collegiate, yeah. I think when you look at the interview, I think he did with Neville, Trent a few months ago, I think was really illuminating in that he said, you know, like, how much he still feels he has to learn, how he's tried to be more mature and let go of certain things in his game in terms of his attitude. And then also just the comment he made around Klopp saying, you know, I'm looking forward to a new manager because as much as I love him and stuff, like, and how much he's done for me, like, I sort of know what to expect every season, like what he wants from me, and certainly in terms of the pre-season and the training and stuff that we do. So I think he's ready for fresh input. I think it'll be something where they'll probably meet and just say, like, look, I know you can do this, and in terms of how the team's going to function going forward, we've always got that in our back pocket. Yeah. But do we maybe look at, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I must admit, listen, Trent Alexander-Arnold was the best right back in world football. We won everything with him at right back. So I really struggle to square the circle of moving away from that position, whilst I get the merit in doing so, given what he possesses. You know, he has absolutely every tool it takes to be a midfielder, apart from those couple of little things I mentioned earlier that I think he still has to iron out. But again, at the same time, I quite like the fact that at times last season you could put Joe Gomez at right back or Conor Bradley at right back and not take Trent off, but then just move him into that midfield. At times he went into the 8, he did it in the Fulham game. He effectively ended up at the 10 in that game and won the game forwards from there. So where he starts in a game doesn't necessarily define where he finishes the game, basically. So yeah, interesting stuff to come. Somebody, Joanne Alviso asked me what happened to Andre. Funnily enough, I seen Andre mentioned for the first time in about 6 months the other day. Fulham are speaking to him once again. probably if they lose João Paulinho. And he ended up just staying at Fluminense because he wanted to win the Copa Libertadores, won the Copa Libertadores, and that meant he didn't get his move. So yeah, I imagine he will be in Europe soon. I can't see him spending the rest of his career in Brazil.
He's on the fringes of the Brazil squad, isn't he? As well?
He's played a little bit for the Brazil squad. I'm not sure he's in the Copa America squad. I'll have to check that actually after the show. Anyway, I won't do that now because I've got other things to talk about. Liverpool are reportedly in talks with final defender David Hančko. This comes from Mundo Deportivo over in Spain, of course. It says Liverpool and Slovakian defender David Hančko are in talks this summer. The Slovak, it says, played a crucial role under Arne Slot during his time in the Netherlands. Since joining Slot's final back in 2022, the 26-year-old has been a pillar of the defence, and there are rumours circulating that the current final defender is open to getting back together with his previous boss this summer. Now, I haven't seen you probably since the end of the season, if truth be told, but I'll ask you this very simple question before we speak about David Hančko necessarily. Do Liverpool need a centre-back this summer?
I think so. I think just in terms of safety, I think the big question mark for me is probably Konate and sort of what happens to him, whether we keep him or whether we sell him, regardless. But in terms of his fitness, and I sort of, the fitness wasn't just an issue for me under the previous manager. It was also the fact that I sort of got the impression that he'd stalled a bit as a player. He was coming on, and the sort of the athleticism and the sort of power he brought to the game in his first season, he sort of he seemed a bit lost sometimes when he was on the ball. If that means you sell him, fine. I do think he's a good player still, and I prefer the club kept him, if you like. But you've got Quansah in the wings, but you can't go into a season, for me anyway, I think, relying on Van Dijk and Quansah as your starting centre-half partnership. Not because of any doubt in their ability, just in terms of minutes, and he's a young lad. Yeah,
they've got to bring another one in my opinion. And I've said it numerous times now on various shows. As you say, Quansah actually ousted Konate in the season in terms of form, not necessarily fitness. And I have no issue with that whatsoever. If it is Van Dijk and Quansah to start the season, regardless of who comes in between now and then, no problem whatsoever. But I think we're almost destined to allow Sepp van den Berg to leave, given what he said in the media recently. And Liverpool have their price tag for him. It's in around the £20 million mark, which may seem far-fetched to some, but Michael Edwards is in the building now and he gets what he wants for players. So we'll wait and see what happens there. But regardless of what happens with his future, and almost regardless of now Joel Matip leaving the club, Liverpool have to go and sign centre-back reinforcements for me. And David Hančko is a reliable type. I'm not quite sure he fits the profile of what Liverpool desperately need. I mentioned 26. It's also said that Atletico Madrid and Leicester City are vying for the central defender services. And I guess linking a player that currently plays for Feyenoord, given where our new manager's come from, feels like a tap-in. And I guess it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if he was to do something like that and bring somebody who he's familiar with, somebody he knows he can trust, somebody he clearly feels like he could get the best out of at Anfield as well as previously. But I'm just not sure about Hančko. I think there's better options out there. Lenny Yoro, Calafiori, to name but two. Most people in the chat agreeing that we do definitely need a centre-half as well. And just on this comment here, Trent is entering, I think he's like 10 days away from entering the final year of his contract. So him, Virgil van Dijk and Mo Salah all in the same boat, and they are three things Richard Hughes has to get sorted pretty quickly, I would say. 96 Clip says Konate is the future. Yeah, and I think Konate absolutely is the future. His ceiling, as much as I love Joel Quansah, and I think he's got an incredibly high ceiling, his potential it knows no bounds, basically. But in a weird way, in spite of what I've just said about Konate and Quansah, I'd put Konate's ceiling as higher than Quansah's. And I know he's a few years older, so that's kind of obvious in terms of what we've seen, in terms of sample size. But Konate has absolutely everything. And that's not to say Quansah doesn't. If anything, Quansah's a bit better on the ball than Konate. I think it's a fair assessment. But look at the size of Konate. Look at the power, the pace he has. Like, I don't think anybody's in a world. I mean, the injury-prone thing is a thing, Bear, and I get it. He only played 19 games last season. I mean, yeah, a lot of that was due to form, though. As I say, it wasn't necessarily he was injured all the time last season. I know it's been a problem in the past. And you're right, by the way, you never walk alone. Like, he was bullied a little bit that last game of the season, in that Everton game, that last derby rather, and that was probably his last start. I'd say you never really seen him after that because of what happened. But I don't know, man. I mean, are you Quansah or Konate? Like,
I'm in the same boat you are. I think, if you're asking me in terms of form at the minute, going into the season, I would say Quansah. But in terms of, as you say, ceiling, Konate's better. But I think the other thing that plays into this as well, by the way, and it's a question the club needs to square, if you like, is Joe Gomez.
Yes.
Where's he playing next season?
Yeah. See, I see him, and feel free to push back on me in this. I see him as doing exactly what he did last season. He played 51 times last season, I think I'm right in saying, which is by far and away more football than he's played for Liverpool for what feels like since he arrived at the football club, which is doing him a disservice a little bit because the first few years he was relatively injury-free. However, 51 times was across left back, right back, barely anything at centre half really. Tiny bit of six as well. And if I was Arne Slot, anyone of that ilk, I'd be saying to Joe Gomez, do the same again. Personally, I don't know where you are on that.
I think you will. I think it's on the club though to decide that, in the sense of if you maybe going with, say, Trent in midfield, this is where all the variables come together, I guess. Then you've got Conor Bradley maybe and Gomez as your right backs for the season. Yeah, I do think it's interesting as well, and we're not going to know until we see some of the first pre-season games under the new manager. He's mentioned a few times in terms of like his influences, obviously like Guardiola, and also he spoke a lot about Arteta. I've seen Arsenal seem to play a lot with four centre halves almost, even though it's not really, but they play almost with four centre halves in the full back positions rather than, you know, sort of wingers there. So he might try and emulate something like that. We don't know in terms of going forward, but then, you know, it's hard to know until we've seen this new look Liverpool, isn't it? Yeah,
it absolutely is, mate, 100%. And I think with a lot of these questions in the conversation will be answered, including this one from Mighty Reds 97, who asked, do you think we'll see less injuries given Slot's style is intense but not as intense as Klopp? Yeah, I absolutely do. And Jurgen Klopp's heavy metal football was very tough on the body, and I guess training was similar as well. Slot's training might not be quite as intense also, but there's no two ways about it. Like, a lot of the conversations I've had in and around Arne Slot's track record at final, almost everyone, to a man, woman, child, didn't speak to any kids, has said Arne Slot's teams, relatively speaking, didn't pick up that many injuries. Now, that could be down to luck, you know, an incredible medical team, a brilliant physio, or, as you rightly say, just the fact they're not quite as hell for leather as some other teams. So, fingers crossed, the likes of Konate and others can stay fit. Diogo Jota, please give me a fully fit Diogo Jota. Please. Sound. We're going to touch on a couple more news stories, none of which I have actual links for because they're just not necessary. Included in Arne Slot's first interview as Liverpool head coach, I need to get used to saying head coach, not manager, he announced, confirmed, said the words that Fabian Otter, are we going with for the pronunciation, will be Liverpool's goalkeeping coach moving forwards. Now, I don't know how much you've seen, read, heard of this guy since in the past sort of 12, 16 hours, whatever it's been. But listen, Liverpool have a new goalkeeping coach. What do you make of it?
Obviously, position they needed filling. All I know about him is what everyone else knows about him, that he's currently the US men's national team's coach.
And Borussia Mönchengladbach.
And Gladbach.
Two goals, yeah.
I was a big fan for a long time, and I haven't seen Paul for a bit, but me and Paul both were big fans of Jan Sommer, who played at Gladbach for a long time. I don't know whether he played or not, but I presume he did. Very underrated goalie, I would say. So it'd be interesting to see. I mean, I think it's obviously Achterberg was there for so long, and the impression I get from some of the exit interviews and stuff that the club put out around sort of particularly Alisson's relationship with the goalkeeping staff was vital. Like, so it'd be interesting to see what he comes in and sort of what he brings, I guess. No,
absolutely. Obviously, you mentioned Alisson. Obviously, Claudio Taffarel has stuck around, which I think is the him and Alisson link is really strong and a clear reason, a clear indicator that Alisson wants to stick around at Liverpool as well, which is boss, obviously. As for Otter, I did a little bit of digging last night. I found some quotes from him about a time where Jurgen Klopp asked about him. I think Burnley's kit man went into the changing room afterwards and said, Jurgen was just asking me about you, because I think, albeit on the face of it, he's a goalkeeping coach, doesn't feel that interesting, significant or whatever. We all adored John Achterberg as he came to the end of his 15-year stint at Liverpool. But Arne Slot is a real thinker, a student of football, if you like, and he thinks outside the box. He's not afraid to use like different techniques and psychologists and all that sort of stuff to get those fine margins and those improvements from his squad. From what I was looking at last night, and I'm going to speak to somebody potentially on Sunday who knows him far better, this guy is absolutely obsessed with goalkeeping. Like, obsessed. Like, not in the terms of, like, just watches loads of keepers, but, like, has studied it to the absolute nth degree. He did, like, a PhD rather than, like, expert performance or something like that. Like, he's a bit of a nerd, is what I'm trying to say, I think, ultimately. He had a career in football. He played for, like, Blythe Spartans and some mad clubs. He was at Hoffenheim for a little bit, coaching their academy keepers. Burnley, as I mentioned, at the academy there for a bit. As you mentioned there, Borussia Mönchengladbach. He spent some time, I think, with New Zealand women's national team as well. So, a well-travelled goalkeeping coach, but he kind of give up playing football like early 30s, I want to say, late 20s, and immediately threw all his energy into being the best possible goalkeeper coach you could possibly be. So really interesting appointment for me, and another example of Liverpool, Arne Slot, trying to find, I guess, best in class and experts in their field, and he feels like he could be one of them. So let's just see. If he can make Alisson Becker better, it's not an easy sentence to say, then he's a genius in my eyes, because Alisson Becker can do no wrong whatsoever. Quickly want to round up some of the Euro stuff that's been going on. Obviously, Andy Robertson captained Scotland to a 1-1 draw last night and kept their hopes alive. Did you watch it?
Yeah, of course. It was a bit of a thingy game, wasn't it? You know, it was a bit empty at times, but they did enough to get the point. They needed the point, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they celebrated the point quite strongly, I would say. I think Steve Clarke at the end gave it the old fist bump. Do you think they might get through? They win the last game? Got Hungary, Dom Szoboszlai, obviously, in the weekend, the final game.
Yeah, I think the thing is like Hungary are in such poor form, aren't they? I think because I was looking at the fixtures and thinking sort of like Switzerland have won a game as well, so they're on 4 and they've done all right. But then obviously they're going to go play Germany, who look in great form. So they could do it. You know, Hungary just don't seem to offer anything, really.
What have you made of Szoboszlai? Because I've seen a relative amount of criticism. I know he ended the season poorly from Liverpool's standpoint, and I, more than anyone, would have liked to see him sort of recapture his best form at this tournament. Hasn't happened yet. I thought he was okay. Flashes in the first half last night, personally, but does he strike you like somebody that might just need a break? And it felt like at one point, more football and captaining his nation, you know, to the Euros, what a big deal. How significant is that? That could be the thing that sparks him back into life. It hasn't done up until this point. Does he look like somebody now needs 2 weeks away maybe to get back to what he was?
Essentially, I think for me the big thing with him, he gave some interesting quotes sort of towards the end of the season where he was saying like how the pace of the league, if you like, in terms of the Premier League was so much different to what he expected compared to Germany. I think he actually needs, and I don't mean this in like a roundabout way, but like I think he needs coaching. I think you know, sometimes you have sort of players, you go through loss of form, and it's almost like they don't know where to put themselves. They still obviously got the talent, obviously, but they almost like they need someone to say to them like, look, you're just going to be a 10 in this game. Don't worry about tracking back, or don't worry about this. Okay, just do that. And the more I've seen of Szoboszlai, the more, certainly in the second half for Liverpool, but also in the games I've seen him play for Hungary, he almost is a bit like, I don't know whether am I like the 8 who bursts forward here and like I gave it off to someone in the area? Am I the guy who's playing sort of behind the striker and I'm meant to be sort of chipping in with goals? He's also the captain, so it's a bit like, you know, what am I doing with that? Like it's I think he's almost got like too much responsibility, and I think he needs someone to sort of put an arm around him and go, your game's just this. Just do this for the next couple of games and you'll find your way back into your best form. Yeah,
he was absolutely sensational, wasn't he, when he first came into Liverpool, hit the ground running and then some. It just felt like he could do no wrong. And I think you're right, maybe he had that bit of a wobble. Injuries, obviously, and then he had a recurrence of his injury as well. So there's no two ways about it for me. He's a sensational footballer. We just need to find a way, and you might be absolutely spot on in what you're saying of recapturing what that was. Alejandro, I always say Mate, but it does just say mate. But given your first name, I'm going to say it's far more continental than what I suggest. Sober needs a rest. It shows they are human despite everything FIFA and UEFA believe. You're absolutely spot on there. And I think you mentioned there the intensity of the Premier League caught him off guard a little bit and surprised him. I think there was a stat early in the season whereby he played almost as many minutes for the first 2 months of our season than he had the entirety of his last season at Leipzig and stuff like that. So I think minutes were probably a factor as well, as you say. We'll start to round up then. Euros wise, Slovenia plays Serbia later on today, well, literally in like 59 minutes. Denmark, England, as mentioned earlier, is a later kickoff, and then Spain, Italy is a juicy old game. Those last 2 games are actually the last Euro semi-finals. Did you know? They're recaptured later on tonight, and then Slovakia, Ukraine tomorrow, and then later on after that tomorrow is Poland, Austria, Netherlands, France. Quite a bit of Liverpool interest in that Netherlands-France game, of course. Sam, I'll quickly run you through the news, pop into the chat, make sure I haven't missed anything important, and then we'll be out of your hair. Gareth Southgate has decided to stand by Trent Alexander-Arnold in midfield. He will be starting against Denmark later on. That game I just mentioned, by all accounts, interesting to watch Trent in there once again. Liverpool have reportedly entered the race to sign Michael Olise, joining the likes of Chelsea and Manchester United in the race to capture him. According to Mundo Deportivo, Liverpool are interested in David Hanchko and are in talks to sign the final centre-back. I think we can all agree we want a centre-back, don't we? Fabian Otter has been appointed Liverpool goalkeeping coach. We had an interesting chat about him a moment ago. Andy Robertson captained Scotland to a 1-1 draw with Switzerland, and Hungary, unfortunately, are 0-2 with Dominic Szoboszlai as their captain. And look, destined to crash out of the Euros, to use a very newsy expression. Sam, thanks for getting involved, as ever. Thanks, John, for joining me. last minute. Like, no, I mean, you weren't last minute. You were perfectly, you know, on time and punctual. It was us that were a little bit late, but nobody's shocked by that news whatsoever. Thanks for getting involved, everyone. Massively appreciated. And yeah, I'll see you again.